Hi, I'm Jeremiah Camara. If you put yourself in quarantine or you're basically limited to the house, you have a lot of time on your hands to think. Who'd have thought we'd be in a time like this, right? There's a lot of doubters out there about this virus, and I definitely don't blame them, but whether this COVID 19 thing is true or not, we have to protect ourselves and our families. I mean, when someone is pointing a gun at your head, whether it's loaded or not, you're not going to say, I bet you Smith and Wesson manufactured that gun. You're going to do whatever it is to protect yourself. As far as this COVID 19, I couldn't help but think how this virus would affect blacks differently than whites. Like they say, when white America catches a cold, black America catches the flu. And the media is actually telling us that we're all in this together. Let's be clear about one thing: blacks and whites have never been all in anything together, especially when it comes to privilege and economics. And I know we're not supposed to be discussing racism because we're in a coronavirus pandemic, but racism is woven, stained, and permanently etched and embedded in the consciousness and the fabric and soil and the air molecules of this country. So it's just as prevalent now as it always has been. Okay? Blacks have always been infected, so to speak, with the deadly and toxic virus of white supremacy. Blacks have always been the host that this virus needed to thrive and to stay alive. Blacks in this country have always been, I guess you could say, socially distant from corporate white America. You know, you got 4 to 5 white men that own more land than all black people in the United States combined. So, by all economic accounts, segregation still exists because the money is still segregated. Yeah, you have a few blacks with money, primarily in sports and entertainment, but in no way does this reflect the masses of black people. It sometimes feels like we're included in America. You know, there's barely a commercial that doesn't have a black person in it, but just because blacks are 90 to 95% of all commercials and films doesn't mean anything when it comes to the financial numbers. Economically speaking, blacks collectively are just really dependent children, light years away from economic equality and opportunity. And why would blacks have the same economic opportunity as whites anyway? That would render slavery in vain. You know, you had over 500,000 white men who lost their lives in the Civil War just to keep us enslaved. Africa was colonized from north to south and from east to west. And chattel slavery lasted for nearly 4 centuries in order to give whites the advantage over black people and everyone who was non-white. Why would you rob an entire continent of its people and its resources and enslave a group for hundreds of years and then turn around and share your stolen wealth equally with them? You know, what colonizer or enslaver does that? But here's what I really want to say. How can black people, how can any black person still be clinging to the notion of a loving God who watches over them every minute of the day? First of all, why would a loving God allow this to happen in the first place? Blacks of all people on earth should be the most skeptical of the notion or the idea of a loving God. There was no loving God to keep your land from being raped and pillaged. There was no loving God to keep you off that slave ship. There was no loving God to keep you from being enslaved for nearly 4 centuries. There was no loving God there to keep blacks from undergoing all manner of racism and societal abuse and injustice in this country, from Jim Crow to KKK to the Tuskegee experiment to redlining to crack cocaine, etc. There was never a loving God there. So why would you ever believe that some loving God is going to save you now? When will blacks ever learn that racism, white supremacy, and Christianity are all one and the same? I know that's harsh. I know that's hard to swallow and accept, but it's true. There is no distinction between those three things. If you don't believe it, watch my film, Holy Hierarchy, The Religious Roots of Racism in America, on Amazon Prime. Leave a review, whether it's good or bad. So, I know there are many blacks who say, well, I don't call him God, or Jesus. Okay, whatever. You call him Yahweh or Jehovah or Yeshua or something else. But you two are in the same boat as all other black people. Just imagine that. Your God actually has a name. Think about that. Your God has a name predicated upon an alphabet created by humans. Those gods didn't keep your ancestors off that slave ship either. You have no special exemptions or fringe benefits either. You're out here struggling and wearing a mask too. I've seen so many social media prayers and prayer chain letters and faith posts by black folks that are just nothing short of slave-like superstition. It is impossible to distinguish religion from superstition. Black people, please, please listen carefully, because we're on the bottom of the food chain in society. So all the bad stuff will always trickle down to us. But please remember this. Every problem has a solution. And we're talented and creative enough to find the solutions that fit our circumstances. But we're not using our brains enough to do it. Yeah, racism is a factor. That's a given. But we have to be accountable for our own actions too. The main problem is we're on our knees too damn much. The solution is not in a church that just continues to rob us of our precious time. It robs us of our precious money. We have nothing to show. For the billions of dollars that we poured into the church, we have nothing to show for it. It robs us from being the intelligent person that we're capable of being. Belief is not knowledge. It just means that you have accepted what someone has told you. Now, I know that grandma and grandpa and them, they told us about this, but we have to evolve, okay? They would want us to be better and to evolve. It's crazy if they could see us now still doing the same thing that they were doing 200 years ago. Listen, if white folks want to believe in some fantasy-based God who had a son, who could walk on water and raise himself from the dead and a host of other crazy and fanatical things, that is their privilege. They're on top of the food chain in society. If they fall, society is much more likely to catch them. If they want to believe in a God and a Jesus, they can do that. They're the ones who created this fantasy God in the first place so they could conquer and colonize the world. The slave master gave it to you to make his plantation run smoother, and we're still believing it. But hear me very carefully. You, as a black person, do not have the luxury to believe in superstitious fairy tales. You are on the bottom of the food chain in society. You have to think your way out of this problem. You can't pray your way out of a problem. We have to use logic, reason, and brain power to get off the bottom in society. This ain't for us. I mean, we ought to know this by now. No one prays more than us. We've always caught hell. But no one prays more than us. We're still catching hell, and we'll continue to catch hell unless we let this crazy stuff go. Like they say, if you keep doing the same thing over and over and are expecting a different result, you're clinically insane. And that's exactly what religion has done to black people. It has made us clinically insane. We are brainwashed to the umpth degree. Now, this Christianity, this religion, yeah, it worked psychologically for blacks in the past to help them accept their condition as a slave by keeping them hopeful that one day they would get to heaven, which is also a big fairy tale. But we're no longer in those physical times, but we still are mentally in those times. The belief that some sky daddy is going to save you from anything or come back and get you, it's not for you, okay? That's not your story. So start thinking and stop believing. Start using your brain because right now we can clearly see where our place is on the food chain in society. So when this corona thing is under control, keep your Sundays to yourself from now on. Keep your money to yourself. Pay yourself first. That's the first law of financial wealth. Get your brain back so we can move up on the food chain in the world. If we don't do this, we're going to continue to be eaten. Okay? So that's all I want to say. I'm Jeremiah Camara, and I'll see you next time.